Hello, friends. I'm Eric Hutchinson. I'm the principal broker and owner of Hutchinson Realty. Welcome to video 13 of my video series, How to Buy a Home in Northwest Arkansas. We have talked about a lot of interesting topics, and today we're talking about a big one. We call it the payday. That's right, it's when the seller gets paid the purchase price funds from the buyer. It's when the buyer gets a new home, and even the realtor gets paid their real estate commission. They're happy as well. Everybody should be happy on payday. In real estate, we call it the closing date. But when does closing actually happen? And is there a particular day that's better to close than other days? Is there a day that we should stay away from on a closing date? Also, what is a split closing? Maybe you've heard of this. There is a split closing. Is that good or bad? Also, who picks the title company that the real estate transaction is closed? We're going to be looking at all of these topics, so let's get into it, shall we? I'm going to go to page 10, item number 22 on the Arkansas real estate contract. Now, as you can see, this is a really large paragraph with a lot of things in here that we need to pay attention to. So we're going to talk about each paragraph and what it means. A lot of people think that a closing is simply when the buyers get the keys and move into the property. Well, that's actually what we call possession, and we're going to be looking at that in the next video. So stay tuned, come back and watch video 14 where we talk about possession and what that entails. But today we're going to be looking at these paragraphs on item number 22, the closing. So the very first sentence basically defines what the closing is. It's basically when the seller delivers an executed deed to the buyer, and that executed just means that both the buyer and the seller have signed it, and so they're basically changing ownership. And it's when the buyer has signed all the paperwork, which includes the loan papers if there is a loan, and the purchase price funds, the money, to the seller or the agent of the seller, not the realtor, but the closing agent, agreed to by the buyer and the seller. That's normally the title company. Where there's a problem is when the buyer's lender doesn't get the money wired in time to the title company or the closing agent. Then we've got a problem, because then we are out of contract if we've missed this date. So this is really important. I want you to hear me. It's really important that we hit the date that goes in those blanks on this highlighted paragraph, that you hit that date, whatever that date may be. Now, you can close before that date and there's not any problem. But if you try to close afterwards, we need some kind of addendum that shows that the buyer and the seller want to move the closing to a future date. If there's a backup offer, that backup offer comes into play as soon as you miss this date. So it's really important that you hit the date. Now, as far as days to close, it's my opinion that you should not close on a Friday. You say, well, Eric, that's when I get off work on a Friday. I've got the weekend to move in. That's when I, as a buyer, want to close a transaction. Well, okay, I get that, but let me just throw a scenario out at you. If you've got all your furniture in the truck and you close at 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, the lender and the title company can't wire money after 3 or 4 o'clock. It's against their rules. They can't do that because there can be some problems with the money being in limbo. So after 3 or 4 o'clock, they don't wire money to anywhere. So if you have not got the money wired from the lender to the closing agent and it's Friday at 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the seller and the closing agent for the seller is not got the funds, which means that you have not closed. And then you're going to have to do an addendum that allows the buyer to either move into the property early, or the seller says, sorry, you can't move in until I get money, or you're going to pay me rent for the days over the weekend that you are in my house. And so it can really cause a problem if you don't hit the date and the money is not transferred either to the seller or to the seller's closing agent. So usually Monday through Thursday is the best time to close, but it's so important. Make sure that you've estimated properly, and if you need to change it before you get to this actual closing date. All right, let's move over to the next paragraph. So the next paragraph is the lower one, and this basically says that buyer and seller have the right to choose their own closing agents. Now, this is where we get into the split closing. The buyer says, I want to close with this title company, and the seller goes, I want to close with this title company. Let me just give you my opinion here. I do not like split closings, because anytime you add a party or add another person in communication, for the transaction, that it's usually not a good thing. Have you ever played that game where you whisper something to someone and then they whisper something, and by the time it gets all the way back around, whatever the first person whispered is not the sentence that comes out, because it's changed so much because of all the parties that are involved in the communication line. So I'm not in favor of a split closing, and I will tell you that you as the buyer are responsible for whether or not you like the closing agent or not. So many times buyers and sellers don't know about title companies, and so they let their realtors pick for them. Here's part of the problem, is that a lot of real estate companies own title companies, and if they do, they're going to push or recommend their title company. So let's move over to the next paragraph. Next paragraph basically says that this real estate contract is written closing instructions for the title company. The title company must follow whatever this contract says. So if there's a home warranty and there's a cost, who pays for the home warranty? It's in the contract. If there is something that says that the seller is going to pay for the buyer's closing costs, that's in the contract. The title company has to put that on the settlement sheet. So they follow this contract to the letter. So it's really important that you get exactly what you want in this contract in writing. So the last paragraph basically says that the buyer and the seller shall have the right to request title insurance and a closing protection letter. Now, let me explain closing protection letter. There actually have been some instances where a title company have absconded with the funds. They took off. They had all this money and they took off. And then whose house is it? The seller didn't get paid the money. So I will tell you that there is an insurance that covers in case the title company messes up and loses the money, and it's called a closing protection letter, and it's $25. I don't normally recommend it because most of the local title companies that we use here in Northwest Arkansas are bonded and insured. So you're just putting insurance on insurance. The very last paragraph in here basically says that the real estate agents can give out information about this transaction after it has closed. If you do not want the public to know about what you paid for the property or the details of the transaction, then you need to put it in item number 30, and we'll cover that in another video. So guys, that is it for today. I know it was a little bit long, but a lot of stuff to talk about with the closing. I hope this information has been helpful to you. You can always reach out to me at info@hutchrealty.com, or you can just message me from this video. No matter what, I wish you the best in buying your next home. May God bless you, and may God bless your home.